Well, welcome to our first episode of GFL Talk Radio, Season 3. It's been a while since we last done a podcast, busy schedules and all that different type of stuff, but we're here and we're doing it now. So it's me and Jason today. How you doing, Jason?
Hey Jim, what's going on?
Not too much, not too much. Anyway, let's get right into this. I guess the first thing that we'll talk about is the playoff teams and what that playoff picture is starting to piece out to be. Let's start with the AFC, and I'll let you kind of talk about the AFC, and then we'll go into the NFC and go from there as well.
All right. AFC, we got a tight race up at the very top there. We got the Titans, the Broncos, and the Texans all tied at 12 and 2. Now, big game here, Jim. Our game of the week for Week 16, uh, Titans and against the Broncos. Basically, what this game is going to do, this is going to determine A, who's going to win the AFC South, and B, who's going to be the number one seed coming into the playoffs. Um, so a huge game. Currently, right now, based on, I want to say based on the tiebreakers, is going to be the Titans at number one, with the Broncos currently sitting at number two.
hmm That
Whatever
would,
happens,
yeah, that
yeah.
would throw Houston down to five at 12 and 2.
hmm Um, so if Titans win, Denver's still going to hang on to the two seed, and then you got the Texans who are going to be sitting in the fifth seed. Broncos win, you got Broncos who take over number one. That automatically vaults the Texans up to number two and puts then the Titans down to number five. So huge swing there.
So in other words, if the Broncos win this week, the Titans are going to be rooting for me week 17. Or I'm sorry, the Texans.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much.
Got it.
Um, from there, we got the 8-5-1 Steelers sitting at number three, and then the Patriots at 8-6. Those are our other two division leaders currently. Um, Again, another big game here with the Patriots and the Dolphins. Dolphins sitting one game behind right now. Um, I, the big thing is I think the Patriots still own the tiebreaker because they haven't lost a divisional game yet, whereas the Dolphins are sitting at 2-2. So the Dolphins still need a lot of help. They're basically a game and a half behind, not just a game. Um,
Yeah, losing to Buffalo 2 weeks ago didn't help.
exactly. Then you got the Chiefs who have a 10-4 record sitting at the sixth and final seed. Now, the Chiefs have got a one game lead up on the Chargers. Um, as far as the head to head goes between those particular teams, um, the Chiefs lost week one to the Chargers, but then turned around and let me find that game score here. Actually, they've lost both games to the Chargers. So if the Chiefs were to lose one game and the Chargers win out the final 2 weeks, then you can see them flip flop right there. Chiefs do have the Raiders and Giants. Week 17, it could come down to the win you're in, lose you're out for the Chiefs.
Yeah, so that's an intriguing race down there with the Chargers and the Chiefs.
Yeah,
And I
a
was
lot of
looking at
moving
the
parts.
numbers as well that the Chiefs are actually 2-3 in the division, so they have a division game left.
hmm
Uh, I better hope that's against Oakland. I love Dennis, but
Yeah, I mean a lot of moving parts. I mean, really, the only um, the only given is that the Broncos are going to be either the one or the two. That's pretty much the only given at this point right now.
yeah, the Texans and the Titans have made the playoffs as well. They've clinched playoff spots.
Yep,
Um, they just don't know the seeding yet.
exactly. Um, the other kind of dark horse you got there, you do have the Bengals who are kind of sitting back a game on the on the Steelers.
Looks like a
Um,
game and a half. The
it,
Steelers are 8-5-1, and the Bengals are 8-7.
yep. And the big thing with that is those two teams split the regular season. Bengals got one game left. Uh, they won their Week 16 game. They got next week. They got the Lions. Now the big thing though is coming down to the Steelers. Um, as far as the Steelers' schedule goes, they've got Green Bay this week, which is going to be a tough game, and then they got the Chargers, who are trying to get in as well. Um, I mean, you could see if the
Who did the
Steve
Bengals have week 17?
the Lions. So
This
if
this is definitely shaping up for the Bengals to slide in the playoffs and
it
the
it
Steelers to not get in.
it is, and it's kind of weird to say this, but what's kind of keeping the Steelers up above the Bengals currently was really that tie that they had early in the season. As crazy as that sounds,
Yeah, the
that
tie
only
against the Browns.
yeah, that only leaves them with 5 losses. Um, I mean, it really comes down to if the Steelers win one of these next two games, they're in. They've got the division clinched. But
Yep, yep, yep.
if they lose both of them and go 8-7-1, and then you have the Bengals who if they win and they finish at 9-7, they take the North. So
Yep.
it's a little there's some crazy stuff could go on in the AFC. We don't quite know yet.
AFC playoff chase looks very interesting. Let's focus over here on the NFC now. I'm gonna break that one down. Your Chicago team, number one seed. Uh, don't think you guys have anything left to play for in the regular season. Would be surprised if I saw a lot of your key guys in the last couple of games. Um, the Carolina Panthers are the number two seed, and they actually do have some stuff to play for. Playoff seeding at this point. Looks like they're going to win with the Falcons' loss this week. That would pretty much lock them into the sixth seed. So it looks like they're going to win the NFC South, but they're 10-4 currently, and they're going to be playing the Rams, who's had a little bit of a break, but he's always a tough opponent. And if the Panthers can get a win this week, yeah, I believe they lock up the number two seed with the win because they would have the tiebreaker on the New York Giants, if I'm not mistaken. And then you've got Arizona and San Francisco fighting for this division, the
Yep.
NFC West. Arizona is currently 8-6, and San Francisco is 7-7. Same thing with three seed. Essentially, you've got 9-5, the New York Giants, and you've got an 8-6 Washington team out there. So it's a one-game lead. So either of those teams, we don't know who's going to win those two divisions. So the 3 and the 4 seed are definitely up in the air still. But if you're putting your early money on it, it would be New York and Arizona getting in. And the 5 and the
hmm
6 seed are pretty locked up with Green Bay and Atlanta. They're just the best, second best teams in their division record wise, but they kind of blow everyone else away. Minnesota they're kind of stuck on the outside looking in at this point at 9-6. The Redskins have to hope something good happens for them this week, getting a win, and Giants lost, like I said. Back to the Niners once again if they can get something to go their way and have the Cardinals lose. I believe it would require these last two games.
hmm
Because I think it's a conference or division record. They're both worse than the Cardinals. So,
Yeah, and
and they split, I believe.
really, Jim, I agree with you. I think for the most part, the NFC is probably going to stay the same. Um, the one team that could sneak in there, I think, would be the Redskins if they were to win both Week 16 and Week 17, and then the Falcons were to lose, just because that would give them a better conference record than what
Hmm.
the Falcons would have. Now, the other thing there would be then the Vikings. If the Vikings were to be able to pull off a win, which their schedule, I know they just won their Week 16 game. Um,
They did
that
against the Saints. This
yeah, that
Week 16 game in the NFC that's pretty do or die is San Francisco versus Washington. So
hmm
whichever one of these teams loses is effectively out of the their division race, and I guess you could say Washington has a sliver of hope in the wild card race, but it doesn't look that good.
yeah, they would definitely need to beat Tampa Bay come Week 17, and then honestly they really need to. If they want, I can send them my PayPal account and they can slide me some money, and I may keep my starters in for Week 17 against the Falcons, but chances are that's probably not going
He's taking donations.
to happen. Exactly, exactly. But really, I mean, that's probably the only way that the Vikings excuse me, the Redskins are able to slide in there. So I think you're right. I think for the most part, um, the six teams for the NFC that's pretty much locked up. We could see a little bit of movement if the Giants were to win Week 16 and Week 17, and the Panthers were to potentially lose a game, just because.
Now, now I will throw this in here. The Giants play the Cowboys Week 16, but they also play the Chiefs Week 17.
So yeah,
So
we
that's a pretty interesting matchup there.
yep. I think what would make it interesting is if the Rams were to beat the Panthers, and then the Cowboys were to lose to the Giants, and we had a Week 17 with a 10-4 tie. I'm sorry, a 10-5 tie between the Panthers and then the Giants, and then we'd have the Chiefs kind of hanging on. That game there, the Giants Chiefs Week 17 could actually like play musical chairs with about 6 or 7 different positions.
Well, I'm gonna say this. I think we talked about this when we talked about the AFC. Is I think the Chiefs have to win these last two games to get into the playoffs. So,
hmm
and there's gonna be some bracket busting on one side in this Week 17 matchup between the Chiefs and the Giants.
Yep. Yep. Because if the Giants were to lose, you could then see the Cardinals jump up to the number 3 seed, and now you're looking at a potential Cardinals Packers matchup in in that first wild card round. That'd be kind of interesting to see.
Yeah, I was about to say I'm not so sure that vaunted secondary would want to see the young Brett Hundley and what he's done in Green Bay.
Exactly.
Yeah, very very interesting stuff the way it's going. Let's bring up. I had a little bit of an idea. Let's talk about teams that aren't going to make the playoffs this year. That maybe two or three teams that you feel like have promise moving forward.
Oh man. Um. Well, I would say one team is probably going to be the Saints. Um. If they are able in this upcoming draft to get a couple of key defensive cornerstones, especially in that first round. I think behind that quarterback, throw into Brandon Cooks, even Bishop Sankey he's been decent, almost at 1,000 yards so far. Um, that could be a team that could cause some trouble for the Falcons, the Bucks, and the Panthers in the South there. Um, Kind of looking at some of the other teams, even though they're sitting at 10-4, I think the Chiefs are set for a while. They got some young, uh, freaking blazing fast receivers, and then that new quarterback, Angelo
Angelo
Hernandez.
Hernandez, that kid is
Yep.
good.
Um, I can definitely see them as far as from a longevity standpoint. I think they could be good for the rest of this cycle. Um, Geez, the other team. I mean, I would definitely say that they didn't play to their record. It's got to be the Seahawks. Uh, I mean, talk about a disappointment uh, in the way that that team played, and I don't want anyone to think that that's a knock on Blueprint at all. Um, as more of what it is a knock on the way some of his his players kind of played. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, there were times, guys were open and he'd throw the ball and Russell Wilson would just airmail it to a defender. Like it defied logic. Some of the things that his AI uh, players did. Um, and sitting at 2-12, that team's they're a lot more talented than a 2-12 record. So that's surprising for this season, but I think come next season, um, that's going to change. Uh, I don't think they will be 2-12 or anywhere close to that
I
come
agree
next
with you
year.
there. I
I would
definitely
say
agree with you there.
those would probably be my three teams to kind of watch out for.
I got one for you, or maybe I got one or two for you. Jacksonville. I think that Jacksonville is in the NFC South race next year, or the AFC South race next year.
Mm-hmm.
I watched them when Aaron Rodgers got back, and I watched them beat Houston. Put their second loss on Houston, and it looked good doing it. So I think that Jacksonville squad, when he's got a quarterback that can, do what he wants to do behind center,
Mm-hmm.
that team can beat anybody. So I like them moving forward and think that they're going to be a team to contend with and seeing what they can do. Um, team that I think might surprise you a little bit going forward. Also, be the one in Oakland. And the AFC West is pretty good, but I think that
Mm-hmm.
he's getting to the point where he's got a good amount of talent built up. He's probably got a good amount of money left over, and that roster is primed for a couple of more wins because I think it's a better roster than 5 wins. The quarterback issues this year with the injuries really have
Mm-hmm.
derailed him. He's on like his third or fourth quarterback at this point. He still managed to win 5 games, which is pretty good, in a league
Yeah,
like this.
yeah. The quarterback loss was huge. Um, like you were saying, he's got some key pieces on his roster. Um, Pretty good receiving core. Um, Young halfback that's got enough speed and good size. Um, I would say the one weak area is probably his offensive line. Um, if he's able to to get a piece or two here in the draft or in free agency as far as O line goes, that's going to be a very very good offense. Defensively,
Great.
he's obviously Khalil Mack's one of the best in the entire league. He's got a couple of other young guys like Tank Sapp, who he's not the fastest linebacker there, but he's good. He's good all around.
Yeah, Tank
Um,
Staff looked very good. He was one of our first draft.
hmm hmm and I know he's shopping Joe Hayden, but looking at that secondary, I'd almost keep Hayden just because you got Roby at the number two, and then the other Hayden, DJ Hayden, at his nickelback. That's three pretty good corners. I mean, that's a good defense. They really, I think, if he can get some consistency in his offense, that's going to be a good team.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, that should be a really nice team. So, having looked at the draft a little bit now that we're getting towards the end of the year, and looking at the potential standings as far as where everybody kind of is going to end up in the draft. Right now, it looks like Baltimore and the New York Jets, both at 1 and 13, are going to be neck and neck at the end of this year for the number one pick.
hmm
Somewhere in that 3 and 4 range, you're going to find Seattle and Detroit at 2 wins apiece, and then it opens up from there with Dallas and St. Louis at 4 wins, and then you got like 6 teams, including mine, that have 5 wins. So there's a lot of that. Basically, that top 5 or 6 is kind of decided, but in these last 2 weeks, you could very easily see that back half of before the playoffs kind of shake up a little bit and end up with an interesting draft order.
hmm
So
Yeah, I think when it's all said and done, your top three It's probably going to be the Jets, the Ravens, and the Lions. Um, now, the Lions, if I'm not mistaken, I believe they own the rights to the Seattle first round pick.
They
So
do actually.
you could be seeing the Lions actually pick probably like third and fourth.
I would be shocked if he doesn't move back on one of those picks if he can.
Hmm.
Um, you know, there's some good players at this top of this draft. I don't know if you necessarily want to pick twice in the top five, if you know what I mean.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I guess it comes down to if one of the top players fills a particular need for him. Um, and at this point, without having too much knowledge of in depth of his roster, I mean, I know he wants to get a new quarterback. I think Stafford's he's going to be moving on to another team. Um, I would actually say that's probably a 99% chance of happening. Um, he's got some decent young, they're young, but he's got some good wideouts. Got a good running back. I would I guess it just depends. If a quarterback is out there worthy of a top five pick, I think he's going QB. And then after that, if there's like a top corner,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Kind of looking over his roster right now. His best corner is Darius Slay, and he's got a nice young corner in Jawan Sapp.
hmm
Uh, but other than that, if you go through, the rest of his corners are either journeymen or young players who are trying to develop.
yep, yep. And with the way that as far as receiving cores go in the NFC North, I mean, you've got to have at least three good cornerbacks in that division to really be able to stop the pass.
Yeah, oh, I agree with you there. I mean, Detroit could definitely flip this draft upside down with whatever they decided to do. They're kind of in the driver's seat as far
Hmm.
as doing what they want to do. I could easily see Detroit. Detroit needs help on the defensive line as much as anything else.
Yep.
Their defensive line is probably the worst 34 defensive line in the league if you look at it statistically. And with the he's trying to play a lot of guys. I feel like that are 4-3 natural guys in some out of position, if you know what I mean. So it's
Hmm.
kind of one of those things where they haven't done it throughout their careers, and the ratings go down a little bit, and all of a sudden your D line isn't really all that good. I think his best defensive lineman is probably a B at best, and that's a reach, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. Just by kind of looking at some of the stats, I mean, when it comes to stopping the run, the Lions currently are 29th uh, and 27th overall in total yards. So they're I would agree his biggest weakness, other than quarterback, is definitely going to be his defensive line. They're just not stopping anybody, at this point, and a lot of it has to do with those guys up front. It could be scheme. Um, it may,
It's definitely it's a combination of scheme and not just having the personnel that you want to run for the scheme you want to run. I
hmm
mean, that's the
hmm
way I look at it.
yeah, and we just kind of looking if you're running a 3-4, his strongest defensive lineman is at least from a defensive tackle standpoint is Demarcus Byers, and he's all right, but he's not a I don't think a prototypical nose tackle. Um, he's got
Not
some
by any stretch of the imagination.
yeah he's just under 300 pounds. He's not quite as strong as you would want him to be. Now he's fast. He's a good, like you said, a good 4-3 defensive tackle. Um, so I mean, maybe switching to a 4-3 might suit them a little bit better, or getting, like you said, the right pieces in that middle of that defensive line, because right now, what ended up really happening is you're getting teams with good offensive lines who are just bulldozing that front three, and the linebackers are getting knocked back 5, 8 yards a carry, and they're just not able to make the plays that you would normally see a DeAndre Levy or a Tahir Whitehead make.
Yeah,
It's just
and
not happening.
when that happens, you're going to blitz more. I mean, that's the natural inclination. Is you're going to
Hmm.
blitz more. And what happens then? You put more pressure on your defensive backs who aren't by any stretch of the imagination all world, and it hurts you in the pass defense. So that it hurts the rest of the defense as well.
Yeah, and they're very linebacker heavy. And look, he's got some talented linebackers. Um, like you were saying, he could potentially move one of those first round picks down. He could possibly get another pick or two from some of these linebackers that he has and put that towards that defensive front. And you're talking about just an immediate turnaround um, for that particular team. So, he can go in a couple of different ways. I guess that's the benefit of being able to have, two potentially top five picks in the draft can kind of give you.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with you there. I mean, it's let's talk about it. We're probably going to be having a new Jets guy coming in. So what can this Jets guy expect? You know, um, let's talk about that.
Are you talking about as far as like that particular team in the draft as
Yeah,
well,
the
or?
personnel on the team and why it's 1 in 12 or 13 or whatever it is. Um,
Well, I think the biggest issue with that team is that they just ran out of money. Too many, large contracts to guys that aren't necessarily cornerstones. Um, a lot of money in that offense into an aging offensive line. It hasn't helped him, or at least that particular team, all of that much. The lack of progression from Bryce Petty as a starting QB hasn't really helped them
yeah, at
all
this point,
that
I don't think
much.
Bryce is a starter. In the GFL. I mean, and to your point of an aging offensive line this year specifically, the on their left tackle and center who are 33 years old, both
Hmm.
of them, they spent $23 million.
Exactly. Um, I would expect the new owner when they come in. Um, I could see keeping Mangold uh, just because of his intelligence and his ability to still be able to block. But I think Ferguson's pretty much done as the starting left tackle. They've actually got a a young, a 21-year-old left tackle currently, and just by looking at his statistics, like he's just as good as
Yep,
what
his name's Larry
Ferguson is.
Wilson.
Yeah, Larry Wilson. So like, I mean, I don't see Ferguson staying, and that's going to clear up a ton of money for them. Um, and just kind of going down this roster, I mean, you got Eric Decker who's making a ton of money and not really doing a whole lot just by looking at
Buster
the rest.
Screen would be on my cut list for sure. He makes about $6 million this year, and the
Yeah,
production isn't there.
no, it's not there. I
Marcus
mean,
Gilchrist is another player who is making about $5.5 million, and the production's not there. Bino Gio Camini, who's a tackle, another player who fits that bill. Um, so there's a couple of different players on this roster. I would say that they could clear out that would help
hmm
them kind of rebuild. And if I'm them, I'd use the restructure on Mangold, $13+ million, even though he's still a good center. Maybe
yep.
get him locked up for the next year or two, as opposed
hmm
to having him for the rest of this year. But
Yeah,
they've got a top draft pick, and they should have some money. I think that they're finally going to start feeling the pain less of like the Wilkerson trade and having to cut Revis and
hmm
Cromartie and all those different players. The Jets have kind of been a cat mess for a long time now.
they really have, and looking at their roster, if it really comes down to are they a 3-4 team or are they a 4-3 team? Um, I mean, on
And that all
paper,
comes down to a new owner and a new coach.
yeah. Um, and I think they've got the ability to kind of go either way. They can pop, Sheldon Richardson down as a D tackle next to Damon Harrison, and then take Dion Livingston and Leonard Williams and put them as edge rushers, uh, and then still be able to have Barnard, Demario Davis, and Quentin Coples as their starting core. Their secondary is not bad. They have two 30-year-olds as their 2 and 3 corners there. I would probably start Garvey if he's not already, just from the sake of his age and his athletic ability. He would be my number one or two immediately. Um, at the safety position, like you said, I would probably cut Gilchrist, and make Mack a starter, and then keep Calvin Pryor. I mean, the defense doesn't really have too many holes. I say across the board, uh, they're solid, with obviously their strengths being their defensive front.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I would say that defensively, they're probably going to need a corner. Uh, that I would say that safety, that type of thing, rebuild the secondary a little bit. Defensive line wise, and even linebacker wise, they look like they've got some pretty decent pieces there.
Mm-hmm.
Offensive line looks pretty much like interior line. Could use an upgrade, right tackle. I'm sure they could use another weapon. At the wide receiver position because they did cut Brandon Marshall a couple of years or this past year actually.
Mm-hmm.
So Eric Decker's the number one receiver there, and I don't really see much past Devin Smith or a young guy named Martin Denard,
Yep.
who hasn't really come out of his shell yet. So that could be interesting as well, seeing how they do there. Let's talk about another team real quick that's close to the top of the draft and another newer user. Let's talk about Sed's Ravens, because they're at that top of that draft area as well. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the Ravens are quite a talented team. Some people don't like Joe Flacco. That's up to you, but they have some veteran players who are pretty good. Terrell Suggs is still around. Kalichi Osemele is one of the best guards in the game. C.J. Mosley is one of the best linebackers in the game. Yonda is still one of the best guards in the game. Jimmy Smith is a great corner. Rick Wagner, a good tackle. Those types of guys. They're good players. Jordy Nelson's kind of finishing his career with the Ravens as well.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got some pieces, but they're a little bit more of a veteran team. So I can see some moves being made here. But the positions that I think are really going to be of need in the offseason is Justin Forssett's a 31-year-old running back. I
Yep.
think it may be time to replace that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I mean, um, their lack of uh, kind of an explosive offensive threat, with Perryman being injured on the year, it's really hurt them. Um, I also think, just by looking at the roster and having played Cedric, and just kind of, you know outside looking in, they got to get rid of Kerry Williams. Uh, Kerry Williams has just been absolutely destroyed.
Kerry Williams gave Sammy Watkins 5 touchdowns in the game we played.
And he and he
5.
gave Kevin White 2 touchdowns and almost 200 yards. So, like, Kerry Williams, unfortunately, is not a starting cornerback in this league anymore. Um, I I'm a little puzzled as to why Captain Munnerlin wasn't starting. Now, that could have just been um, the CPU switching those two players around before he joined, and then he just kind of didn't change it, based on the overall of the player. But um, I mean, even just by looking at the coverage abilities, uh, you know, Captain Captain Munnerlin's not a good man coverage guy anymore. He's more zone, but he could at least run with a lot of receivers in the league if he needed to. Whereas Kerry Williams, I mean, he's got linebackers faster than Kerry Williams.
Yeah,
I mean, Kerry
Tyler Pat,
Williams,
another choice that he could have played instead of.
yeah, yeah, Tyler, heck, even Will Davis, um, you know. So I think Kerry Williams, his career in the NFL is at least from a GFL standpoint, is it's done. It's done. He needs to just retire.
Yeah, those corners, like I'll give you an example. I think the Saints really kind of taken off a little bit when they've hit Leotis McKelvin a little bit more, former corner out, that I had in Buffalo year one.
Hmm.
Um, I let walk because he's a walking uh, torchable garbage can, if you get what I'm saying.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I
So
mean, with so many explosive receivers in the league, a guy like Kerry Williams, a Leo Otis McKelvin, like they're better off being moved to like free safety, giving them that extra 10 to 15 yard cushion, so that way they're just not. A lot of these guys are just getting blown off the ball. We see press coverage so much in this league that as soon as a receiver swims that corner, it's done. And you're on a 90 95 speed wide receiver and an 82 speed corner. By the time they get 20 yards downfield, that's a 10 yard gap between those two, and it's just no chance.
yeah, I mean you're absolutely right. I mean, look at it from the perspective of the corners just don't come in as fast as the receivers, and I mean
Hmm.
even the young ones. So I mean, trying to put these veteran corners who've been in the league 10, 12 years on these some of these young receivers who are just not. I have a 95 speed, 98 acceleration rookie receiver who I played in that, or I played against Tampa, and he actually just flat out outran the corner. I mean, like didn't didn't press anything. He just flat out outran him because he's
Hmm.
that much faster than him. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
So interesting little discussion there we had about some of the losing teams. I'm going to bring up some of the mid-tier teams now for a few minutes and kind of talk about teams like mine, teams like Philadelphia or Cleveland and Tampa that kind of fell off from the playoff picture last year, and you know where teams like that kind of need to go in order to rehabilitate and get back to where they want to be.
Hmm.
Uh, you know,
I think I,
back
I
in the
think for
playoffs.
a team like the Eagles, they season one, season two, NFC East champs, back to back. Um, this year, they had a kind of a middle of the road defense. They were able to stop a run. Their pass defense was kind of in the back third, but when you look at their stats, and I know stats don't really tell you everything, but as a team, they threw 31 interceptions on the year. 26 of them came from Drew Brees. That alone was really the downfall of that team. Um, they got a good young running back. He just really wasn't able to get much going because of the fact that they were having to throw the ball so much, being down as much as they were because of turnovers. That
I also don't. I think Drew Brees, being a veteran quarterback, it hurt when he traded me Lane Johnson, the right tackle. Big protector. It's kind of tough to lose. A franchise. You don't normally refer to a right tackle as a franchise guy, but Lane Johnson, I consider him to be a pretty big
mm-hmm.
piece. If you have tackles like Cordy Glenn and Lane Johnson, I feel like you can play a little bit of offensive line.
Yep, yep, and you know they've got weapons. They've got really, as far as from a 1 through 4 on the receiving core, they're all good. I mean, nobody is outstanding by any means, but they're all young, they're quick, and they're pretty explosive on the edge. Their running back is really really good. Um, it honestly came down to just bad quarterback play. Um, I remember watching a few of their games, and just the accuracy of Drew Brees was just horrid. Just throwing the ball 10, 15 yards off target into the hands of a defender who really didn't even have to move. Um, I, that it really killed him. I mean, his defense is actually pretty good. Uh, they're not the quickest out there, with the exception of Michael Kendricks. Um, he brought in Sam Shields in the offseason, then traded away Byron Maxwell. Uh, he doesn't really have much in the back end as far as safeties go. He's got some young guys back there that he's been playing. Um, but really, it just came down to the offense. The offense itself, he was 23rd in rushing yards, 19th in passing yards, and 28th in points. He just wasn't scoring.
Yeah, I know that's normally the deficiency. There's a deficiency somewhere when you're in that 5, 6, 7 win range, and it sounds
Mm-hmm.
like for him he wasn't scoring. I mean, for a team like that, they only, they gave up a decent amount of points. They gave up 406 points as opposed to a team like, Cleveland, who gave up 354, was in a similar situation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so there's a little bit of a defensive thing there as well. But if they can get the line play and the quarterback play from Breeze, the question is Breeze going to stick around?
I guess it really comes down to if he finds himself a quarterback that he likes in the draft. I mean, I don't think Ryan Mallett is the answer, and that's his current backup at the moment. So, it's really hard to say. Drew Brees could retire, and if that happens, you're talking about a bunch of money that frees up for the Eagles to kind of go around and make some moves in free agency, um, to try to kind of boost the people around whomever is going to be that guy that's under center for them. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this offseason, especially as we get closer to the draft.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's interesting. A team like the Colts. I'll give you a great example with the quarterback like Andrew Luck, but they've got some pieces that they're missing. Defensively, I feel like cornerback they had to trade Cavante Davis because of cap concern.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like they're a couple of pieces away as well from being able to try and compete and do something. And they have a couple of first round picks
Yeah.
in this draft as well. So they're one of those wild card teams that you don't know kind of where they're going to be picking, but you're going to see their name 3 times in the first round if they don't trade any of those picks.
And really, by looking at their team offensively, they're 13th in the league in passing. Um, they're able to move the ball, but they're like, I call it the 2020 team. They can move the ball great in between the 20s, but once they get into that red zone, they're just not putting points on the board. They're not putting touchdowns on the board, I should say. A lot of that comes down to the fact that they scored 6 total touchdowns from rushing the ball, which I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's probably the lowest in the league.
Yeah, probably. There's a good
They're
chance of that.
they're just not. It's bad when Andrew Luck averages more yards per carry than what the two running backs do. Um, I mean, he's got 2,000-yard receivers and an 800-yard receiver between Dorial Green Beckham, Colby Fleener, and Dante Moncrief. So he's throwing the ball uh, fairly well. He had 20 interceptions with Luck this year. I wouldn't say is great by any means. It's actually the most that he's thrown in a season so far, of the three that we've played. But I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that uh, he's not he's just not getting much of a running game, because he's also only has 20 touchdowns, which is the lowest of the 3 seasons that we've played so far. Um, so I know you mentioned defense, but just looking at that team and their depth chart, uh, they got to get a playmaker back there in the backfield. I don't think Ingram or Richardson is even worth a damn.
Yep. So both. I'm sorry. So Indy is a very interesting case as well. You know, I'm gonna take a little bit of this time to talk about draft steals and kind of bring up the last couple of drafts and going through. My biggest draft steal was probably my starting safety this year, who I drafted in the third round, is Keelan Kitchens. He's a strong safety. Um, Ended up being pretty good. You know, and it's developed pretty nicely throughout this year. You know, so if you, I know you don't pick a lot in the, haven't picked a lot in the higher rounds. So,
Hmm.
but you have picked in like the third round and stuff like that. What's your
Hmm.
biggest draft steal thus far?
Oh man, um, let me
Caught you
let
off
me.
guard.
Yeah, you caught me off guard, but I think I may have one for you. Um, and I think it was a second round pick. But the quarterback for the Saints. Um, are you talking about who's been picked and who's playing currently? A rookie right now, correct?
Yeah, yeah, or in the first 2 years or something like that. No, it's just the biggest draft surprise.
I would say I wouldn't necessarily say a surprise the fact that he's playing well with Taylor Haynes, the QB from New Orleans. I think what was really surprising was the fact that he even fell as far as he did, and nobody else who didn't draft him. I mean, we've talked about a few teams who who have had quarterback issues, and then you look across the league, and a lot of our losing teams really it comes down to the quarterback play.
Yeah,
And
how did he get by Arizona is a great example.
well, yeah, I mean, and not just Arizona. Um, you know, the Lions have been trying to move on from Stafford for 2 seasons now. How did he drop past the Lions? Um, how did he drop past um, the Texans? How did he drop past the Jags
And the
and
Jets.
the Jets and all of these teams that just didn't take a flyer in this guy. And I'll be honest with you. Maybe next year, maybe in 2 seasons, maybe season five, he'll be a Pro Bowler.
Oh,
He will be one of the I believe they take three Pro Bowl quarterbacks. I think he will be one of them. Um, because at that point, uh, I think Rich will be able to get a good running back and a good solid running game behind him throwing the ball, and he'll have an offensive of strategy set up to utilize his speed and his legs as well as his arm. I think that guy's he's gonna be a stud.
yeah. I think league wide, mobile quarterbacks aren't as much of a thing. I don't think we run as much with quarterbacks. I don't think you don't see as many people, excessive rollouts or anything
Hmm.
like that. Bring that up another day. You know, I'm going to bring up my team this year. We were horrible. We were 5-9, or we're 5-9 currently. Probably finish in that 6-10 range or something like that.
Hmm.
Will probably pick in the top 10. Now, I did get my pass defense into the top 10, but that was about
Yeah, well, Watkins did have another big year, so
it. Yeah, is it about
that'll always help.
yards and 15 touchdowns?
Now, I know I don't know if you would you call an undrafted rookie who's turned into a Pro Bowler, would you call that a steal, or would you call that more of highway robbery?
I guess we'd probably go with highway robbery in that situation.
Because I think this kind of gets overlooked just because of the fact that Hur is able to run the ball as well as he does. see, year in and year out. But his running back, Gerard Harrison, wasn't
Mm-hmm.
even drafted. He just wasn't drafted. He was an undrafted free agent um, that he picked up in his rookie year, rushed for 1,700 yards, 16 touchdowns. So far, his second year has rushed for 1,265 yards and 13 touchdowns. So in 2 seasons, and granted, he still has, I believe, 2 games left to play. He has rushed for just under 3,000 yards and 29 touchdowns.
Pretty impressive for a guy that wasn't drafted.
Yes, yeah. And how many people looked over him, myself included?
Yeah, I definitely wasn't looking to draft a running back at that point, which is probably why I never even got a whiff.
I was the same way, but now I think he actually no, he didn't lead the league in rushing last year. I think he was in top five, but he's also in the top five again.
Oh,
He
Chris
was
Ivory
he
led the league in rushing last year.
Yeah, he I believe he was last year's rookie of the year.
That would make sense.
But yeah, I would say that those two probably um, from this year's rookie crop, I think Taylor Haynes has probably turned out to be one of the better rookies so far. And then I think from last year it is Drought Harrison, the undrafted rookie that Carolina has.
Yeah, they're definitely a good group. Definitely a good group. Very interesting conversation thus far. Um, you know, is there anything else that you would like to bring up before we, try and get out of here? This is kind of the amount of content that we had prepared for this.
Mm-hmm. Um,
So any parting shots, any parting remarks, anything like that?
no parting shots. You want to go ahead and we can kind of wrap it up with some of the changes to be expected.
Yeah, yeah. The expected changes that we're looking at, guys, is we'll detail all of this in full in the groups going forward. But basically, we've heard your cries. We are going to be moving forward into season 4. We will turn off injuries for Sims and Force Webs. Um, the other thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be upping the speed threshold uh, somewhere in the 8 point range, I believe, is what we came up with. We'll give out an exact number. It's to kind of stop some of the verticals, and make verticals a little bit less OP, is the way I'll call it. And the other thing that we went over, what was the other thing we went over? I'm blanking right now.
Um, really, to me, this is the big one. We had a huge debate before we started about, are we using the catch buttons? Are we not
Oh yeah,
using the
that one.
catch buttons? Um, we originally set out, we were going to allow you to use the catch buttons, but you're not going to be able to switch on defense. Um, there were some valid complaints about that, about not being able to switch like on deep balls. You keep guys from being able to just jump over top a corner. Uh, I think we're now to the point where we are going to be doing away with you being able to dictate the type of catch that your wide receiver can do. We are going to be leaving it up to traits. So if you want
We've
route,
already had our first complaint.
um,
Hilarious.
uh, sorry, Chris. I mean, um, it's not about nerfing guys. It's about making sure that if you have a speed guy who is very good at catching the ball and turning upfield, that's what he does. Not jumping over top a 6'3" or 6'4" cornerback who has perfect position on you, and then being able to haul down a 50-yard Hail Mary because I went through two progressions and couldn't go to number three or number four. So that's kind of, and that's not a knock on you, Chris. That's just kind of league wide. So the best thing that I can tell you, you guys that utilize that Y button a lot, if you want to be able to throw that vertical route and have your guy jump up and do it, buy the trait. And you know Rao is somewhere jumping up and down, like beating his chest because we've talked about traits.
Yeah,
He's the big trait guy.
yeah, he's yeah. We'll let him tell us what he's doing, but
Yeah. Um, so with that, and it's not just about hitting Y. You can't hit X, you can't hit A, you can't hit any of those buttons anymore. Um, and we will know when you do it because as soon as you hit that button, that yellow or whatever color circle it is, yellow, blue, red, whatever it is, it immediately goes underneath your receiver. So we will know. We haven't really talked about what are we going to do if somebody does do it and makes a big catch. We haven't really gotten to that point. We just know that what we think the best route the league can go is to not be able to really make a wide receiver who's a possession guy being able to make one-handed catches over top of everybody. We've all seen it. We've all bitched about it. So there it is. Dangling. Make them dangle.
well, that was the information that we were looking to give out. I'll be, detailing all of this, like I said, in full moving forward. So you know, don't jump down our throats yet.
Yes.
uh,
Yes.
it was really fun having you on and doing this with you, Jason. But I think it's time for GFL Talk Radio, the first episode of season 3, and probably, I mean, depending upon how we do it, the only episode of season 3 to end on a high note. So, all right, guys, it was good talking, and this is Jim and Jason signing off. Talk to you later, guys.